Bobby here. This video is actually not to talk about this Kramer Focus, even though it's a great guitar. I've done a video on it. I'll throw a link down below. As we move forward, if you could click and subscribe, and what do they say? Smash the like button. But this video is actually to talk about guitar magazines from the 80s and early 90s. I'm gonna have to put my glasses on because it's kind of hard to see without it sometimes. Some of these I have here are guitar magazines that were scanned in my computer that I got from Steve, and then some were actually live or real magazines from the 80s. In today's world, you can go on Google, so many search engines, you got the internet, there's YouTube, which just opens up information and guitar playing tips, how to put things together, and where to get parts. So many great things that in the modern technology that we live in. But a long time ago, if you were looking for a guitar, you'd probably have to go. There was no Craigslist, so you'd go to the one ad, and you'd have to maybe drive 2 hours to go find a guitar part, or a certain guitar, or just there was a lot of mom and pop stores back then, and you'd have to call up and say, "Do you have this? Could you put me on the list if it's coming in?" So in today's world, from getting guitars, learning about guitars, I don't know how many articles I would read about how Eddie painted his guitar with Schwinn bicycle paints or something like that. And now, even I've done a couple of videos on, painting guitars. So the internet has really opened up the world of communicating and getting information, which is awesome. But when I was younger, if you were working on a lick, on a solo, and you just couldn't get it, one of the resources you had were a lot of the guitar magazines. This one is Guitar for the Practicing Musician. And this one's a scan. On the cover is Phil Collins and Stephen Clark. And Phil Collins playing an Ibanez Destroyer 2. If my friend Chris is watching this video, he actually has an Ibanez Destroyer 2. So would you let me borrow it for a little while so I can do some videos on it? Aside from that, they came with sheet music. I think in this one was, some ZZ Top, Give Me All Your Lovin', Rock and Roll Hoochie Coo, and a lot of information and ads in here. And some of the things I want to talk about, some of the ads that were in some of these magazines. I've got a lot to show. This may be a long video, but hopefully you'll enjoy it, and we'll go through some funny things. Over here, Play It Like It Is, which is essentially, some tab books. I'm not too sure if this would be just a regular music book that would, have the chords, or an actual tab one where everything's broken down. And the great thing about a lot of these guitar magazines they had back then was, they'd have the transcriptions in tabs. So there's the music for it, and then the tab, which you could figure out how to play something. A lot of the times, not all the tab was completely accurate. But it was just a great point to start off from. Because, sometimes if you went, I had a guitar teacher for a little bit. And he was very, I had a couple of guitar teachers, and they were really good. But they never really got into the exact notes. They kind of get you there. So the tab really helped you find something, especially working on the Eddie licks, or as you started getting into the Steve Vai and Yngwie things, at the time, were just so intricate. And, we're so used to it in a world where you've heard so much. Everybody plays Van Halen on YouTube, and there's some great players out there that can do things note for note. But, back then, being, 13 or 14, and, hearing all the licks from I'm the One, or some of the things that he's doing in Fear You Love Tonight or Eruption, it just felt almost impossible. And the tabs really kind of brought you one step closer to doing it. So don't want to ramble here, just want to share some of this stuff. This one's a Guitar for the Practicing Musician. I think the transcription on this was Paranoid, Walk This Way, Lick It Up by Kiss, Steppin' Out with Eric Clapton. It was great in some of these articles over here. Actually, let me put the cover so you can see this one. I'll put a bigger picture up so you can see them. This one's happened to be a scan also, which is kind of cool that, this year, the year on this one was April of 1984. And, this is way before, Journey was a super big band at that time, if they call it corporate rock. And this is Sammy with a great solo career. And, a couple of years before, right before he joined Van Halen, Sammy had a big hit with I Can't Drive 55. And, Aerosmith was in a big transition phase. This is even before they got back. So I'll put some pictures up so you can see a little bit closer. You know, this is Jimmy Crespo, who had replaced Joe Perry in Aerosmith, and I think he played on the album Night in the or was it Lightning Strikes? I know there were two albums where he played and helped write songs with Steven Tyler. Schultz Rockman, which later was the stepping sort of precursor to a lot of the rack mounts that would start coming out. You can find a Rockman now. I actually had one of these. Some guy gave it to me. I got one like the time from a guy in Boston, going in Daddy's Junkie Music, and right before I walked in, he pulled it out and he says, "You want to buy this?" And you know, I was a teenager at the time, didn't have a whole lot of money, and I had like $15. He goes, "I'll take it." He gave it to me, and I let one of my last guitar teachers use it, and you know, granted I was like 17, and never got it back. He moved to another state. I don't want to mention his name. I don't want to get him in trouble. Another ad here for Kahler. You know, the world's finest choice of professionals. You know, at this time, everybody wanted a Floyd Rose in the guitar. You know, they came standard on Kramer's. They were on Jackson's and Charvel's. I think that even though Kramer had the exclusivity to them, maybe they would buy them and put them on, you know, for custom orders. But I think at the time, they were either using, even Jackson and Charvel were using Kahler systems and stuff. And I actually had a Guild guitar that had a Kahler. I remember one time, I'll just do an example on here, you know, when you do one of these drops like you have the string so loose. Sometimes if I did such a dive bomb, the low E would come, the ball of the string that was holding the low E in would pop out. And, you know, they weren't a bad system. They kind of stayed in tune, but they weren't as good as a Floyd Rose where it literally was locked in both ends. And I remember the nut that they had for the, on the Kahler system, the Allen wrench was very, very thin, so it was so easy to strip. And I had that guitar for a little bit and got rid of it, I think, to not this Kramer Focus, but one that maybe looked like this, you know, because, you know, back then, you know, you get something and you trade it to buy something else. Another magazine here that's really cool. This is with a guitar for the practicing musician. Jakey Lee's on the cover with one of those custom purple burst Charvels. You know, today he's got his white signature model and he's got the blue, because he had, back then, I think when the album for Ultimate Sin, he was a Charvel, you know, endorsed by Charvel. And he had that purple burst and a blue burst. And now today, they have, you know, the signature white one that he's known for, and then the blue burst. But I'm surprised today Charvel didn't do a copy of the purple burst because it looked pretty cool. A lot of good transcriptions in here. I just want to talk about some of the ads that I find kind of amusing. This is for G&L Guitars, and it's Mark St. John. What year is this? I know it was when the Ultimate Sin was coming out. This is in February of '86, and I think at that point Mark St. John was out of Kiss because some health condition, and so Bruce Kulick replaced him. But I think he was still out there trying to, you know, play or get some work. But at least he got that endorsement with G&L Guitars, which was started by Leo Fender. Was never really a big fan of those guitars. Here's a cool picture. You know, I just showing some things that were in the magazine at that time. You know, it just kind of brings you back to what was kind of popular at the time, what was selling. You know, Brian made, obviously, you know, the Red Special guitar, but now you can get a BMG Red Special, and they come, you know, in some different colors and, you know, different hardware. But at this time, he was working with Guild on making some models. And actually, if you can see kind of close up, I'll put a picture up. He has a Kahler system on this particular one. I know for a couple of years, he was working with Guild on making a Brian May guitar. And I think if you look these up, these are quite expensive. They're going for maybe like $3,000 or $4,000. I mean, Guild was a very good quality guitar. We have here an ad for Yamaha amplifiers, and they got a Yamaha double cut. And, you know, just like in a lot of the magazines, they have, you know, tips on how to play doing double stops. The person who wrote Guitar Secrets in this one is Steve Vai. This is before he joined. I think he was probably in Alcatraz at that point. Right before maybe he kind of hooked up with David Lee Roth. And some of the ads in here are pretty cool. They have one for stereo parts. There's all parts, where now you can just go to the websites to get things, or Guitar Center, they'll have them over in the accessories. Sometimes at the stores, some of the inventory is kind of limited, so just going online, and even I think they sell them through Amazon. Fast, reliable service and sound professional advice. Giant Sound Center in Fairfax, Virginia. A lot of the ads in here are cool. Billy Sheehan is doing some secrets on the bass. Broken chords, Malmsteen on the bass, talking about probably some of maybe some Yngwie bass lines, I guess. I'm not sure. And they have a thing here for straps. And then they have riff books on tape. Riffs, what am I saying Rick for? Riffs companion series lets you listen, read, play like a pro. And they came in cassettes. One's a rock riff, blues riff, heavy metal. Tape and book, $6. You have to send your check or money order and postage and handling. Here's a cool one. You can learn how to use multi-tracks. It's a class forming in the Institute of Audio Research in New York. In 9 months, you can become a trained engineer. Let's see here. Oh, Sam Ash. Now, you go online, they got a website and they got all kinds of stuff. You can call them. But back then, it was like, they had just a number you call if there was something you're looking for. And, back at those days, granted, the great thing about it, whether it's Guitar Center used or Reverb or eBay or even a Craigslist, it's so much easier to find guitars or parts you were looking for, which is great. But back then, you probably had a call, and these guys would say, let me call some other stores, and maybe get put on a list, and they'd call you down the road. Let's see here. Play guitar like the pros, recorded versions with notes and tabs. I think they got a George Benson and who was that? It looks like Night Ranger and Rat. And then Play It Like It Is, Songbooks. It's Iron Maiden, Ozzy, Def Leppard. And then here's one, West Tone, I guess West Tone guitars. I really don't remember seeing any of these guitars. When I was younger, the main guitar stores was the one that I would always go to is Norfolk County Music. That's where Steve from Boston used to work, and that's when I met him. And, they had Gibsons, Kramers, Ibanez, Fenders. I can't remember if they had one of these. And then the other guitar stores that was big in the Northeast was Daddy's Junkie Music. They had about maybe 9 locations. And, they sold the Jackson, Charvels, Fenders. I don't think they were selling Gibson. I don't remember seeing Gibsons over there. Because I remember the main store in Boston, when you would walk in, to the left, there was just a huge section of Charvels and Jacksons and Kramers and everything else. That a small U section, decent U section for Boston, I guess. And but I don't remember seeing any Gibsons there. And I remember that the Fenders they had Fenders, but not a whole lot of them. But you got to remember, this was the 80s, so everybody wanted a boutique guitar or a shredder guitar. But these guitars I never really remember seeing, and maybe you should look it up and see, what they're going for used. Rock Secrets Revealed, Bootsy Collins, and you can learn reggae and some of the secrets from Iron Maiden, and it's hosted by Herbie Hancock. It's Rock School with guests Chet Atkins, Bootsy Collins, Sly and Dunbar. And then they have over here, just when they had some of the things that were out in the market for guitars, looks like a Paul Reed Smith custom for $1,300, which back then, is pretty good price for a guitar. Kind of, talking about 1986, 1985. So probably in today's world, that's probably close to $3,000, I bet. Strat lock to upgrade your tremolo on a Strat. Looks like they put somehow fine tuners near the saddles. But evidently, it must have not worked that well because you really don't see that anymore. Put this over here. I got another issue I'll try to keep this moving quick. I don't want to bore anybody, but I just think if you're a guitar player, and it doesn't really matter how long you've been playing with. You've been playing for the last 15 years, 20 years, but going back to the 80s, it just kind of shows you how different things were back then. Guitar for the practicing musicians, got Eric Clapton on there. Looks like he's playing a blue guitar. But what I find kind of interesting, and some of the, I read some of these articles when I got my hands on them, because this one is from '86. This issue I really don't remember, but in this particular one, when I was reading the article, Clapton talked about at one point he was going to paint his famous Blackie guitar green, and one of the roadies were like, "No way." So I find that kind of amusing. Here's a great ad for an SG with Angus. This is the fastest neck in the world, SG62. What I find kind of funny about this is, at that point in time, this is probably was 85 or 86. It's right before Guns N' Roses came out. And if you ask me, I think Slash is the one who was really responsible for bringing Gibson back. They were around, but making them popular. Because at this point, everybody wanted a shredder guitar, And maybe, think about it. Think about the music that was going on at that time. The only people that maybe weren't using a shredder guitar were, maybe the guys from Ford are playing Les Pauls or something. And, it seems like even at that time, a big band like Journey, Neil Schon was always playing something different. He even had his own line of guitars, Schon guitars. But, maybe for this small, short window, maybe Angus was the most popular person playing a Gibson. Even at that point, Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin had broken up years before, but Jimmy Page doing his solo projects, he was playing Strats and Telecasters. If you look back at some of these videos that he was doing in the mid-'80s, he really wasn't using a Les Paul that much. So let me put this here. And here's a pretty cool ad for Randall Amps. And it's Vivian Campbell, and this is probably while he was still in Dio, way before he got into White Snake or even Def Leppard, which he's been in for the last 25 years. Here's a pretty cool thing, the Ultimate Lick System, hard rock. You could do jazz, blues, country rock, and all these cassettes with a little booklet that would probably help you in your playing. I mean, in today's world, you can go on YouTube and get a lot of this information. There's so many books out there. And but back then, this, just was, believe it or not, this stuff really helped some people. I think I even bought some of them myself. I see when I was going through these earlier, I seen one of those learn to play heavy metal. Here's some more things where you'd call like a number. This looks like it's G&L parts. Some everybody needs a strap that has bullets on it, because you got to look cool. What else is on here? And you had Mike Varney with Shrapnel Records, which I suppose at the time was an independent label. You had over here the bands were Tony McAlpine, great player, Racer X, which was Paul Gilbert and was it Bruce Boulay, Steeler, and Vicious Rumors. I'm not familiar with it. You could send a check or money order to get one of those cassettes. And this one over here, kind of cool, talks about the charts, and it's telling you, what's selling at the time. Amps over 500. It was a Marshall in this order: Marshall, Peavey, Roland, Fender. Guitars that were selling best over 500 were Gibson, Jackson. Guitars under 500, Kramer, Fender, Ibanez. And you got to remember, this is right before. I think it was like 87 is when Ibanez came out with the RG, which really kind of set the standard for guitars moving forward, for, rock guitars. And before Steve Vai was working with Ibanez. Here's a Dr. Licks, and he's going to help you learn, all the hard things from, let's see here, they got Led Zeppelin, Van Halen, Stray Cats, Iron Maiden. There were cassettes and books, and they kind of would mix them up of different players. But, when they put Yngwie, you had so many young kids looking at this, like, because everybody wanted to play like Yngwie. And here's a pretty cool ad with Steve Vai with his green meanie. You can kind of see it. Hopefully see a better picture. I'm coming down. This is way before the guitar became, so road worn. I think, obviously it's that guitar, you got it from Grover Jackson, started out as a Sunburst. And you can see the Carvin amps. And the funny thing is, in a lot of these magazines, they would have like a flat record that you could put on a record player. I think it was a 45. And I think at this time, he was doing almost like a kind of a promotional thing where he was playing the amp, showing all the sounds, and he probably wrote something really good on it. I bet if you go on YouTube, you could probably find that particular 45 that is a promotional. Here's another ad for Kaler. Unfortunately, these guys just couldn't stick around. I wasn't a big fan of the system, but I just like it. I just love seeing all these ads for Kalers, like, take your old one out and put a Kaler in, Incredibly simple. Okay, let me just show you another one. I got a couple of things here. I hope I'm not boring everybody, but I just think this stuff's kind of cool to share with guitar players. They laughed when I said you could have perfect pitch, but when they heard it for themselves, this one's great. This was in all the guitar magazines. And, they have like a kid there, with a Judas Priest shirt to try to attract a younger kid. If anybody ever got any of these systems about learning perfect pitch or getting perfect pitch, put a comment below. Tell me how it worked out for you. And, in the 80s, everybody had a VHS, a VCR. So Hot Licks, which were really good, they had, Arlen Roth, I think was the first person to come out with like an instructional tape. They got, Mick Taylor on there. John Entwistle, Rudy Sarzo, Steve Morse, some Nick Boycott, I'm not sure of him, and then J.J. French. Never really thought of J.J. French as any kind of a super player. I guess a decent songwriter. Not to crap on him, but, So there was Hot Licks. Olivia Newton-John wanted to get physical, but guitarists need to get serious. This is another one about probably just learning music theory, things that you can just Google right now to find out certain things on, theory for guitar and acoustics and all that kind of stuff. New York's #1 guitar center as close as your phone. Focus 2 Guitar Center. And there's lady with leather, really shredding on guitar. And then I guess it's a Muradian guitar, which I've never heard of, if I'm saying it even right, with Chris Squire. He says it's quite simply the best bass of the 80s. And then, of course, an ad for Play Like the Pros. Stunned with the Solos. Stunned with the Stars. I guess this one was do some incredible solo, send it into Marshall, and you'll win a 24 track or a Marshall. Okay. Oh. Do you wish you had perfect pitch? I do. He can help you find it. And then, there's always a flying V, but this is the Ultra V by Carvin. I think at that time with Carvin, now you can go to their website, and this is way before websites, but I never saw Carvin in a guitar store, and I'm not too sure if they were almost like a mail order, like you'd send you a catalog, you'd call and say everything you wanted. This one has a Kaler on here. Not a big fan of flying Vs. And what do they got over here? Something with like a Randall rack mount. And I guess, the marketing is something to be desired. The last thing you ever want to have associated with any of your products is a toilet. What else they got here? I remember seeing this one's in black and white. Axe jackets. It was like a little thing you could put over your guitar because it'll protect it from the elements. A MIDI controller. What else? Ewan Conklin guitars, and it looks like this guy with his lady friend wrapped around him. Everybody needs an Axe jacket. And I'll show another ad on this a little bit better, but this thing I got to say was great for me. This I actually bought. Note for note guitar solos. What Note for Note was, well, I'll give you the history of it. When I used to hang around the guitar store at that time, I was like 14 years old. And, you always seen players come in and play, but a lot of the guys who work there were just great players. And one person who worked there we talked about was Steve from Boston. And Steve could do those. He could do Van Halen licks. I remember watching him. Granted, if it sounds kind of crappy because I haven't been working on it, but I remember watching him do one of like the licks from Eruption with a. Or like he did a bunch of licks from Eruption, and he'd always show me stuff, which was great. But the thing that was really cool was he said he had got note for note guitar solos. And I'm like, what is that exactly? And they had it be on the counter, and it was like a cassette. And if you guys can find a picture, I think it was note for note. And the guy who did him, I think it was James Gleason or Jim Gleason. There's a picture of him where he looks like an accountant. I remember he had some weird Jackson that had like no horn and these big glasses. But on this one they had for the cassette, it was Van Halen, and it was the solos for pretty much everything off the first album, and maybe some of the songs like Spanish Fly, and a couple of songs. I can't remember the songs. I know that there was about 10 solos, Van Halen solos, and the ones you'd want to know from the stuff from album The One, Ain't Talking About Love, Feel You Love Tonight, Ice Cream Man, because with Ice Cream Man, I always thought when Eddie did that whole lick, right, going into the solo with the. Excuse me, I'm not playing it right, but I always thought Eddie was doing this. But come to find out, this is way before you could see him doing this stuff live, because there was no YouTube. They weren't showing Eddie doing these kind of crazy solos on MTV unless like it was a video. And there's no video for Ice Cream Man. Eddie does the. I can't even do it right now. Fingers aren't warmed up, but. I'll work on it later. I have done it before though. So these were great. And the way they worked was, you put the cassette in your player, and it would play, and what they would do would say, like, they played the lick, and they would break it down, depending on how long the lick was, maybe into 3 or 4 parts, and they'd play that first little section, and then they would say 6th string 5, or 3rd string position 6, hammer, pull, this and that. And what you had to do was I would sit there and I would listen and I'd write it down like on tab, because if you sat there, you just wouldn't retain it. So I think always just writing it down really helped. And this was really, really helpful because it was just a great way to learn Van Halen stuff, because at that time, there was some tab maybe for some Van Halen stuff, but it wasn't always accurate. And this way, it kind of broke it down for you. So I liked it. It worked for me. If anybody out there has heard of Note for Note or used them, just leave a comment. Tell me what you think. Like I said, it was a big helpful thing for me. So let me just do a couple more. I'm not gonna keep this going on too long for you guys, but just want to share some of the fun stuff. I do remember, this one's obviously from a scanned computer, but I do remember buying this actual guitar magazine. It was George Lynch and Billy Sheehan, and this is probably around the time when he was with David Lee Roth, or joined, because they have the transcription for Shy Boy, because that song he actually wrote, even though they played on the album. And then, George Lynch was pretty big with Dokken. And what's the solo that they do on here for his? Or maybe they didn't. They got a transcription for 5150 by Van Halen, Shy Boy, Alan Holdsworth with Road Games. Oh, and Dokken, In My Dreams. And then there's an Eddie Van Halen poster feature. You've probably seen that poster hanging around before when I had the setup in the room a little bit different. This was April of '87. It was $2.95. And the thing that's cool here is, and George Lynch had that skull guitar. When you were a kid, they're like, wow, that looks so awesome. And then over here, some cool things that just really brings you back to a moment in time where, Aerosmith got a prize for comeback of the year, and that album was Done with Mirrors. This is way before Permanent Vacation, we know, was a really big album for them, and then Pump, which was just huge. But this is when they finally kind of got back together. Done with Mirrors, not my favorite Aerosmith album, but at least it got them back, and they were kind of back in the rotation again, doing things. When I showed you those ads earlier from a couple of years before, now Rockman is getting pretty big. And, the way they want to catch people's attention on some of these instructional videos where they put Malmsteen, Van Halen, Rose, Rock House videos. And they got this guy with a really cool mustache and a flying V. And it looks like one of those, he's got a Floyd Rose on there and a Charvel in the background, which were great guitars. Then they had, prizes or awards for, best song, best guitar player. And at that time, Metal Garden Waiting was Kirk Hammett. Runner-up was Tony McAlpine. Comeback of the Year was Aerosmith. Runner-up was Heart. The college circuit, you guys remember the Del Fuegos? Underground Metal, Anthrax. Runner-up was Slayer. Down and Dirty, Billy Gibbons. Runner-up Jimmy Vaughn. Man on Bass, Billy Sheehan. And Billy Sheehan was just got so much, listen, he's a great player, one of the best, but he got a lot of attention now. He's playing with David Lee Roth, which that band got so much attention. Geddy Lee was a runner-up. A songwriter, Mark Knopfler, runner-up. John Cougar, Mellencamp. Remember, before Mellencamp, he was Johnny Cougar. Out of left field, Alan Holdsworth, and runner-up Eric Johnson. And Eric Johnson's just amazing, but this is way before the attention he got later on with Cliffs of Dover. Still relevant after all these years, Judas Priest, the Rolling Stones, Guitar Album of the Year, 5150, and runner-up, Marching Out, which I believe was Yngwie, was Marching Out his first album? And, at this time also, Yngwie was just, he was huge. Nobody had played like him. Granted, as big as there was Eddie and there was Randy Rhoads. Randy Rhoads had died, but everybody was still always talking about Randy. Yngwie was just amazing, and nobody had heard anything like him. Most Valuable Player, Eddie Van Halen, runner-up Steve Vai. And then, Guitar Solos of the Year, In My Dreams. If you guys remember Hearing Aid, which was the metal version of a Live Aid, Help Hungry People. I think the album was called Stars, Dreams. Okay, so I'm not going to dwell on that. Here's a young George Lynch promoting his Kamikaze guitar, and then what else ESP had to offer. And when you look at this, that red ESP looks very similar to a Kramer, is it Kramer SM1 or whatever the name Kramer was doing at that time, but you can kind of tells you subliminally that these guys were putting guitars together for Kramer. I'll put up a better picture, and I'll really show that red guitar. And I'll put up a picture of the Kramer guitar that I'm talking about, because at that time, ESP was making guitars for Kramer. Here's a great ad with Steve Vai and Billy Sheehan. They're playing DiMaggio. Alan Holdsworth, at that time, was playing Charvel guitars. He had that album, I believe, Road Games. And then there's some ads here for, all kinds of Engel amps, American Schuster Chevy guitars. It's just kind of funny, some of the stuff that people, I guess, liked back then. And, look at that guitar. That looks horrible. I'm sorry. Who'd want that? Also over here, they would have almost like classifieds, somebody looking to join a band or a band looking for a guitar player. Carvin for their pickups. You can learn the art of recording. And other ads that are in here. I do think it's so funny to see some of these ads. They're just so dated. Guitars at the time that were selling, I think, Kramer Focus, Charvel Model 4, amps, PV Bandit, Marshall 50 watt effects, Boss. So pretty cool stuff here. One guitar I just never could get into, or the line was just PV. And then again, you want to color your sound, you can do that with Kahler. And I got a stack over here. I'm not going to go through all of them because I don't want to keep everybody. But I want to show some things that are really, really cool. This is the very first issue of Guitar School. It was from the publishers of Guitar World. And I remember I just grabbed this because, number one, it was Steve Vai. And he's doing like a little Vulcan thing. You can see that over here. And that was, with this floral gem. These original floral gems are going for so much money. Look on Reverb or look on eBay if you can find them. But the cool thing on here was they had transcribed the Crossroads duel and all the guitar playing that was going back and forth in the movie Crossroads. Jimi Hendrix like a Rolling Stone, Van Halen I'm the One, Jimmy Page, Heartbreaker, and Ry Cooder, I think it's going to work out fine. This was just great. I remember just always going through this magazine. And some of the ads in here were pretty cool. Again, Shrapnel Records now has gotten bigger. There's a thing for Paul Reed Smith here. I just put some tabs on some of the cool things that I found in here. Oh, Learn to Burn. I'll put a better picture of this. This was pretty cool. When they first started, they gave you a cassette and they gave you a booklet with everything written out. This was from that guy, Kurt Mitchell. He ended up doing some tapes later on, and I really haven't seen him lately. I mean, they had some videos where he did some really great note for note Van Halen stuff, but at this time it was just cassettes, and they were kind of expensive. I mean, we're talking about $20, and I remember just begging my mom to use her credit card so I could call because it was a 1-800 number. Got to remember, there was no website, and I did get the Van Halen and the Yngwie one, because I remember I think my mother said, well, it was coming near my birthday, because what was the year on this? Well, this is April of '89, but I remember she said, fine, you can get 2 and that's it. No, she got 3, because I remember the ones I got now. It was Eddie Van Halen, Yngwie, and I think it was Warren DeMartini. And actually, it's, listen, the guys they put in here also were Steve Vai, Jake Lee, Vivian Campbell, some incredible players. That was the Styles, where they just broke down their solos and, the song itself. But then they had mixes of bands, and then they had mixtapes where they maybe put a Guns N' Roses with a Judas Priest. So that was pretty cool. Some articles here on Steve Vai. Again, now note for note is getting a little bit bigger. Again, these guys were, it was a lot of work to sit there and like I said, I would just, I would transcribe it just so I could work on it later on. But then they started putting Eric Clapton stuff in here. They have one for like Crossroads, Sunshine You Love. You remember, and back then, to get tab or stuff, it wasn't available. As you get older now, you can figure out things without having to get tab. But back when you're younger, this was just great. Then they had, remember Frank Gambale from Australia, mate? He had his, his whole thing with the way he used to pick. I think it was up, down, down. I think his picking system, I'll show it in a minute. I mean, granted, he's just an incredible player. But some of the other ads they had in here, here, I'll show you one. I can't pronounce his name, but it was a guitar player from the band Loudness. And this was the killer guitar. I still think they make these. I mean, he was a pretty popular player at that time. Some other ones over here, I'm just going to run through them real quick so you can see. Guitar School, Motley Crue. They got the transcriptions over here for You No Good, Alice in Chains. And so this one's getting around 91. This is, by the time 92 comes around, nobody's caring about shredders. It's all about grunge. Alice in Chains is getting popular at that time. Steve Miller, Alice Cooper. Anything interesting? You got to remember, this is still, internet hasn't even been dreamed of at this point. So there's more ads in here for a lot of things. Let me just pull one up so we can take a look. Oh, there's Vito Bratta, probably before White Lion broke up. He's talking about, looks like some carving stuff. What else they got here? Another guy teaching us how to have perfect pitch. What else they got here? Different things. Oh, this is pretty cool. See over here for Warmouth Parts. Warmouth really didn't start getting a website together till about 2003, 2004, because I remember I did the video and I put together my own black and yellow Bumblebee, the Eddie Van Halen guitar. And I got all those parts from Warmouth. And I remember at that time, I had to call up. There was no website or anything. So just a sign of the times. What else I got here? It says you can be an innovator when you're playing. The Guitar Vocabulary Series with jam-along tracks. Put that up. And what else we got here real quick? Oh, and then everybody with their ADA amp systems and stuff. Guitar for the Practicing Musician. Great transcription for Killer of Giants. Ry Cooder, Little Sister. And Steve Vai with his Heart guitar, because this is when, by the time I'm now, what year is this? This is 88. This is right around when David Lee Roth's album Skyscraper came out, and Steve Vai had that Ibanez Heart guitar, which even back then I thought was silly. This is one I got from, I believe, Tower Records. It's young guitar. It's from Japan. Tower Records had a really good selection of books and all kinds of stuff. But the thing, obviously I can't read Japanese, but they would have the name of his song. And I think Yngwie would maybe work with them in the transcriptions and really kind of broke down a lot of these. I find Yngwie I love him, one of my favorites, but I think his stuff is just so hard. But it really broke it down, even showing how he does some of the picking and things like that. And then what I thought was really cool in this particular one, even though it's not a guitar magazine, it was like, all the guitars in Yngwie's house and some of his favorite guitars. I mean, they're all Strats. But we'll run through these quick. Musician 1990, Steve Vai with his 7-string guitar. This one is 85 with Yngwie. Yngwie, I think that was for the album, probably Marching Out, or Rising Force, I think it was his first album was, but just a big fan. He's a great player. He was very young. I bet if he kind of read some of the stuff he was saying back then, today he'd probably be like, oh, wow, I was a little obnoxious, but he was a young kid too. As I talked about, when Steve Vai did that ad for Carvin, it would come with a little record you could play in a 45. And this is just Arlen Roth. He actually did some of I think he was the music, almost like the music leader, or, when they were doing the movie Crossroads, he kind of worked on a lot of the stuff with Steve Vai and Ry Cooder, I believe. He has an article on Yngwie and his Rising Force. And then, Mike Varney, have a spotlight section for new talent. And, you send him a cassette, and if he liked it and thought it was great, he would put a little information about you. I think that's how Paul Gilbert came to attention to him, was in one of those things. And I guess, a 14-year-old Paul Gilbert really impressed Mike Varney, if that's what it is. Speaking of Paul Gilbert, I actually got to meet him at a clinic one time. And what I'd like to do is when we get to 2,000 subscribers, I'll do a video on it, because I got pictures. He let me play his guitar. Unfortunately, no videos, but and he gave some stuff out, some pamphlets. It was really cool. What have they got here? Oh, Manny's Music is celebrating their 50th anniversary. And then Eddie Van Halen on the back, promoting the Ripley stereo guitars. It's pretty much like a Beretta, but then it had this whole intricate system with like 6 knobs, and you get all kinds of sounds. I've never played one. I know that even to get a used one right now, you're talking about probably $3,000. Some more guitar schools. Vito Bratta, big fan of his, awesome player. Just some of the transcriptions he got in here. This is around 91. By 92, White Lion was done. I think he just walked away from the band. And music had changed a lot. As we kind of, I don't know if I have any 90s ones over here. There's another one with Zakk Wylde, another guitar school. This was 92. He's playing his Confederate guitar. Don't think that would go over too well today. Another guitar school with Steve Vai. This is 1990. He's real cool with a 7-string gem and a snake, a python, whatever it is, rolling all over the fretboard. And transcriptions for AC/DC, Living Color, BTO, Great White, Robert Johnson. And you could win a lesson, a guitar lesson, and a 7-string if you applied for one of the things in here. Another ad for ADA. Got another one over here. Steve Vai with his burnt 7-string. At this point, looks like 1991. Jason Becker was in David Lee Roth's band. Some transcriptions they have over here. Kind of the same old, same old. Actually, here's a really good ad. Eddie's no longer with Kramer, and he's doing his Music Man guitars, the 5150s. I'm not even sure. I think they were 5150s at the time because I don't think he even had his son yet, so he wasn't calling anything Wolfgang. But these particular Music Man guitars, really nice. Really, I played them. I remember back then I played them. Only thing I didn't like is they had a Floyd Rose, but not a real Floyd Rose. It was a licensed model, and I just didn't like the quality in those particular ones. But granted, that guitar went in 1991 when I was a teenager. I think even at that time, they were close to $2,000, or maybe around $1,700. It was a lot of money, especially for somebody in high school. But they were really nice, and today you can't find one of those used for under maybe $3,000 or more. Another one with Guitar Player magazine with Steve Vai. On the back over here, Floyd Rose. This is an 86. And I remember seeing some catalogs. You could buy the Floyd Roses separately because that's what a lot of guys were doing, where maybe they didn't want a Kramer, but they threw a humbucker on their Strat, and they'd have somebody install a Floyd Rose. But I remember they did have another Floyd Rose. I'll put a picture up. There's the gold one, which would be similar to this, but then there was another one that was made. I don't know how the springs worked or whatever, but you would put it on a Les Paul, because I remember you could buy them, you could order them separately. And I don't know if you ordered them from Floyd Rose, you ordered them from Kramer. And this was, if you've seen the picture of the Floyd Rose guitar, I'm really not sure who all those, maybe they're endorsees or who some of these people are in the pictures. I don't know. Paul Dean from Loverboy. Oh yeah, that looks like Paul Dean there with his arms up. I'll put a picture up so you can see. Okay, Paul Dean, he was a guitar player for Loverboy, and I remember he had a Kramer at the time. Let's see if they got an ad in here for it. Oh, actually, here's a pretty cool ad with, you put it, I can see it. Saw something over here with Jeff Beck and Seymour Duncan, who's making pickups for him. And actually more classifieds, how people got in touch with each other. Here's a great one. This is a 1986. Steve Vai with his green Meanie all beat up. On the back, you can see another advertisement for Kaler with the guys from Autograph. Another issue of Guitar World, Steve Vai and Joe Satriani. Anything special in here? Not kind of the same old, same old. Guitar player, Guess Who. Seems that Eddie Van Halen and Steve Vai were in a lot of guitar covers. This is a real cool one. This is right when they started the David Lee Roth band. This was great. I remember getting this. It was, this is Steve Vai now who's joined White Snake, and it was his 10-hour guitar workout. And you can actually buy that book now, but it was all in here. I remember when I was a kid trying to work on it. I'm like, oh my God, this is just nuts. Here's another one. Steve Vai. This is 1990, so at this point he's in White Snake, and some other transcriptions like for Yngwie, and if you want to learn the song Forever by Kiss. And now we kind of get into the 90s, and everything has really changed a lot. Eddie Van Halen's on this one. And the transcriptions are Veruca Salt for Seether, Extreme Midnight Express. There was one for Van Halen, Don't Tell Me, Page and Plant. And now, some of the things in here, what else they got for some of the ads and stuff. You can get, 10 CDs for the price of one. Chord guitars. Zach Wilde with, I think it was Pride and Glory. At that point, I think he had left Ozzy for a little bit. This is before he put together Black Label Society. Blue Saraceno with Samick guitars. I'll put that up. You can see it a little bit better. What else they got here? Anything good? Ted Nugent. Okay, and I got one more, and then we'll call it end. Trent Reznor, Eric Clapton, Jimmy Page, and the transcription. So now at this point, it's in 1995, and music has really changed. You know, before you had transcriptions for a lot of shredder stuff. Now it's for Bang and Blang, REM, the theme from Batman. Okay. Train of Consequences, Megadeth, All I Want to Do, Sheryl Crow, Hoochie Coochie Man, Eric Clapton. And, you know, Trent Reznor, 9 Inch Nails at the time was really big. So by the, here's I guess the theme for Batman if you want to learn it. You know, and by this time music has really, really changed. This is the mid-90s now, so there's the grunge, there's alternative. You know, Pearl Jam was super big at that time. Alice in Chains was big. I thought Alice in Chains I really liked them. They were really good. Wasn't crazy about all the other grunge stuff, but I don't know, do you categorize Alice in Chains as grunge, I guess? Yeah, maybe. Here on the rise were guys like Pantera. This is probably for one of those wireless systems. Who else did they have here? And just kind of cool looking at some of these ads. A lot of rack mount stuff. And Oasis, yeah, it's been kind of right before they started getting kind of big. Never was really a big fan. And yeah, just at this point, you know, the music has changed a lot. So a lot of the things they're putting in here. And, you know, they still got the typical ads, you know, for crybabies, pickups. Still no websites. You can get yourself a pig nose. All right, well, just wanted to say thank you for watching. I hope this wasn't too long-winded. If you have any questions, put a comment below. But I appreciate you watching. And any questions, email me. And if you saw any of those ads or you remember buying any of those products, just put it below. We'll kind of go back and forth. Please subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you soon.